What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Fierce Framework, where we talk about becoming fierce through messy action, baby steps, and cultivating our confidence. I'm your host, Mary Beth. I'm a self-diagnosed ADHD entrepreneur with a vision to see more women break out of the mold society tells us we're supposed to fit into and start living lives that we're excited about. My goal is to help other neurospicy entrepreneurs work sustainability and individuality into your business so that your business works for you and supports a life that lights you up. So I hope you find encouragement and inspiration in these episodes. Let's get into it. What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Fierce Framework. Today, I want to talk about what to do when you just don't feel like doing the work. This is an important topic to me because I feel like I'm in this place all the time. And it can be incredibly frustrating when you're in that place of like knowing that you want the result, but you don't want to do the work to get there. Especially being ADHD, like in the past, I got so used to just forcing myself to do things and berating myself until I felt bad enough to do it, or like waiting till the last minute, and then it's like you have to, or else the world's gonna end. And I just developed like a lot of unhealthy ways to force myself to do things when I didn't feel like doing the work. And as I've gotten older and I'm trying to work more like with my brain and not against it and trying to be more accepting and like gentle with myself and have a sustainable business where I'm not breaking myself down and burning myself out, but I'm actually working to do things in a way that I can keep it up and keep doing the things that I want to do to support my podcast, to support my business in a way that is sustainable for me. That's one of the key pillars of my coaching is like there's so much advice out there and there's so much information and that's great, but a lot of it is not geared towards and maybe isn't even practical for neurodivergent people. And so that's why I'm so passionate about sharing the things that work for me or the insights that I have or the things that kind of cross my mind that I feel like might be helpful is because I think there's not a lot of stuff out there specifically for us. And so that's part of why I want to touch on this topic because I think it's more common than we talk about, honestly. It's something I struggle with all the time. So let's dive in and basically I'm wanting to dig into like when you know what you want to do and you want the end result, right? So say I want to have a podcast. This is a very on the point, on the nose example. I want to have a podcast, but it's like every time it's time to record the podcast, I'm just not feeling it. And it's like, ugh, I don't want to get on camera. I don't want to record. I don't want to have to do it. Or maybe, it's more the editing side, right? Like you don't want to edit. You don't want to have to do the show notes. Like you just don't want to have to do the work that's required to get you where you want to go. And so if we're on this journey, right, then maybe there's things that we used to do that would get us to do it, but are either like harmful to ourselves or will burn us out or whatever those things are. And personally, like, I don't love waiting till the last minute. I'm also self-diagnosed autistic, so I think that's part of it. I think if I was like just ADHD, maybe it wouldn't bother me so much. But like, you're like stressed the whole time that you're putting this off, right? And so you're like procrastinating and you're stressed and you're like super freaking out, right? You're like, and it's taking up all this mental space and energy because you're stressed and you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, I need to get that done. I need to get it done. I need to get it done. And then it's finally like when it's late enough, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now like my brain will let me do this thing, but I've been freaking out about it for weeks or a month or days or whatever it is. And it's like, bro, it's just exhausting. You're like, yeah, did I get it done before the deadline? Like, yeah, but is it sustainable? Is it? Right? So, yeah, and these are like things from my personal experience. I'm not a doctor, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. But these are some of the things that like the thought processes that have helped me and the kind of the tools that I've used to help get myself to do the things. So, first is just do it shitty, do a terrible job and get it over with. Um, I have used this for pretty much everything, whether it's like a social media post, or even a podcast. I know, or like planning out my content, right? So, how this helps me is it helps me push past the perfectionism and getting hung up on, and take this with a grain of salt because I feel like it's such a fine line and it's going to vary from person to person. And I don't want to talk us out of holding ourselves to a standard of excellence, but I also want us to recognize that a lot of the time our standard of excellence is so much higher than someone else's, or what is expected, or a lot of people's, or even just so much higher than good enough. And so I don't want to encourage us to like slack off or lower our standards in general, but it's like when you're having the hardest time of getting yourself to do the thing, right? So it's like this is a tactic or a technique, right, for these specific situations. I'm not wanting to encourage you to like do everything you do shitty, like that's not what I'm saying here. And I hope I don't give that impression at all. But there was one time specifically with a podcast, and that's part of why this sticks in my head so much. I was like, wait, I was down to the wire, and I think I had to post like that same day, and I still had to record and edit and do the show notes and like all the things, which takes me a while. And even though I don't do a ton of editing, like I re-listen a whole episode to like see if I need to edit stuff. And so I remember just being like, oh, bro, like I'm not feeling it. I'm not in the headspace, which again, separate thing, right? If we can be in the energy or the headspace, or like when we can get into that flow and like do that thing and knock it out and do it at our best, I think that's ideal, right? But sometimes when you're committed to something, or you're just like not gonna get into that headspace or that energy, and like somehow you know that, or like you don't really have the leeway to wait until you're in like that energy, then sometimes you just kind of need to knock it out before you're able to like get to that ebb and flow point, right? So this is separate from like, I'm not saying if your thing is due in like a month and you might be in the headspace like Tuesday, force yourself to do it Monday. Like that's not what this is about. This is when you're like struggling, right? Okay, let me stop. Um, but yeah, so one of the things that stuck out with me with the podcast that must have turned out better than this because I'm fighting for my life. I specifically remember, and like that's why it stuck with me. I convinced myself, I was like, you just need to record it. Like you need to have something recorded because you need to push this out. You've already waited to the last minute. Like I'm literally not gonna have time to upload this thing before it's supposed to be up. And I try really hard like not to get too lax with my schedule because with the way I am, if I give myself an inch, I'll take a mile. And I don't want to do that. I want to, it's like a way to respect and honor my people by being consistent in that way. But also, I've allowed myself to be able to do that without pushing myself too hard because I have a very sustainable, like minimum requirement for myself, right? The podcast is bi-weekly, and pretty much the other thing I do is like a newsletter, okay, in my email, which you should totally sign up for. But yeah, like everything else, social media, and then like obviously the coaching itself is ad hoc. But everything else is kind of icing on the cake. So I have a very small, manageable requirement for myself. And that's part of why I strive so hard to make sure that I'm meeting those requirements. So with the podcast, I specifically remember like I'm just gonna have to edit the shit out of it and it's gonna be terrible, but I just need something recorded and then I can fix it and edit it. And then I'll at least have something to work with so that I can, piecemeal it, whatever, whatever, and get something posted out today. And like this sticks out to me so much because recording that podcast and listening through it, I was like, I'm gonna have to edit the crap out of this, bro. It's gonna be so bad. And I listened to it and I was like, this is actually really good. I was like, am I delusional right now? I was like, this is actually a great episode. And yes, absolutely, I had to edit some things out, but it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was not nearly as bad as I expected it to be. And that, this long-winded story, that's the moral of the story. So the point of telling yourself, like, just do a terrible job, do it shitty, just do it, is because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be way better than you thought it was going to be. And it might even be ready to go. It might even be good enough to work with. And if it's not right, then you have a rough draft, right? If that podcast was trash and I couldn't salvage it by editing, then at least I like got in the flow and I got the conversation going and I like got the wheels turning, right? Of actually turning the bullet points that I have into words and like a conversation, a monologue, I guess. So even if it doesn't work out as well as that podcast episode did for me, you're still better off than you were before because now you have something to work with, right? Even if I did need to edit every minute of that video, at least I had something to edit now. If I would have kept putting off recording it, I wouldn't have had anything to work with, right? And you can't create a podcast out of thin air. You need something, something recorded. And and then if it's something that's not like a recording, for example, maybe it's planning your week or like you're planning out your content. Just do it shitty. Do a bad job. Just get something done, right? And so if it's not good enough, okay, then maybe it's a rough draft. But it's still better than nothing, especially because a lot of us ADHDers, we have a hard time starting. And I think that's what gets like that's what hangs us up with this a lot of the time, where it's like you don't want, we have this block when it comes to actually doing the work to get to where we want to go and taking the steps along the journey, initiating the action and actually like doing the thing. It's like, yeah, you want to have a podcast. Okay, but you have to record the podcast. You have to post it. You don't have to do show notes, right? But it's like you don't have to edit, but it's like maybe I do for mine, right? It's like so you have to do these things in order to have a podcast. So I keep saying like I want a podcast, I want a podcast, I want a podcast, but I'm not willing to do the work. And it's like, okay, so what's the disconnect? Right? And so this episode is all about like how can we bridge that gap? And so that has been really powerful for me is just to like do a bad job. And then at least you have something to work with. At least you have a foundation. If it's something like a content calendar, right? And you're trying to plan out your social media posts or you're planning out your podcast episodes for the month or whatever, even if you do a really shitty job, well, now you have a rough outline. Okay, you have more than you had before. And next time you come back to it, you're not starting from scratch. And so typically, because you're not starting from scratch, it's actually going to be easier to jump back into it and reiterate and bring that those standards up. Like bring that, what am I trying to, like the value, like make it better, like make it up to par, right? Because if your first iteration where you're like, okay, I'm just going to do a terrible job, I'm just going to do it shitty, but I'm just going to do it, and then it actually turns out to be shitty, which usually it doesn't. Usually it's way better than you expected it to be. But if it does actually turn out to be shitty, okay, then the second time you come around to it, when you're fixing it up and you're polishing it up, it's going to be easier to get that momentum and to up level that thing, whatever that first draft was, because you're not starting from scratch. And starting from scratch is usually like the biggest block, one of the biggest blocks that we deal with our ADHD. Okay, so that is a huge thing. One of the second things is like just being gentle with yourself. And this is something that I've done a lot of work on. Like instead of beating myself up and being like, oh, if you would just apply yourself, all those things that I used to hear when I was a kid, right? If you would just try harder, if you would just apply yourself, oh, well, you shouldn't have waited till the last minute. Now, you have a headache and you're not in the right headspace. And of course, but that's all your fault because you waited till the last minute, you idiot. Like, it's not, I don't want to be the person who talks to myself like that anymore. So the journey has been working on being more gentle with myself and more understanding and operating as if there's not something inherently wrong with me. Okay. Like, I'm not going to get into like all the shame and the baggage that comes along with like being told that there's something wrong with your whole life. But it's like a lot of us with neurodivergence, we thought these things, our symptoms were like our fault, our moral failings, and it's not. And so on that like healing journey, I'm wanting to reframe how I talk to myself. And it's like, okay, so if I'm not the problem, then what is the obstacle? So if I want to have a podcast, but I don't want to record the podcast, what is missing? What is happening here? And then just trying to be gentle with myself and have curiosity and try to figure that out. And asking, like, how can I give myself what I need so that I can do the thing? And sometimes that's like removing a barrier, or sometimes that's like adding an incentive, or whatever that might be. It might be a variety of things. Okay, so a couple little bullet points I have with that is like just being gentle with yourself and working on what you need to do the work. So kind of just reiterating what I was referring to earlier is instead of like beating yourself up and trying to force yourself to do it and just well push through and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just be better, or you shouldn't be here in the first place. The most unhelpful comment. It's like, well, okay, thank you. That's so helpful. When I like, how do I do that? What do I do now? Where do I go from here? And you're like, you shouldn't be here. Like, okay, thanks. I can work with that. Anyway, sorry, that was one of my favorite things to beat myself up with before. So just being gentle and being curious, right? One of the things I will look into is incentivizing myself. Is there something I can do to make it more enjoyable, right? So if it's a situation where it's like maybe you hate the chair or the desk or whatever, like maybe it's cold, maybe you're hot, and it's like, how can I make myself more comfortable? Because also, a lot of us with neurodivergence, like we're sensitive to our surroundings. And so if we don't pause and take a second to ask, like, what is going on? What is causing me to not want to do this? Then we might overlook a subtle thing that would actually make a big difference. Maybe your desk is cluttered and it's making you feel like you can't get your thoughts in order, or whatever it is. But asking yourself that question gives you kind of the pause, right, to answer it and be like, oh, what actually is going on here? So maybe you need something, or just maybe you can make it more enjoyable, like incentivizing yourself with a treat after, or adding a beverage, or a lot of the time, especially with group podcast episodes, you'll see me drinking coffee, and it's like that's kind of it's like a little comfort thing. Having that mug, I have my water for practical, right? I don't want to get choked up, but that makes me feel prepared. I'm like, okay, if I have like a coughing fit, I have my water right here, and so that's like a psychological comfort. It's like okay, I don't have to worry about that. You know, if I do get a dry mouth, I have my water right here, and the coffee is like it's like a comfort. It's like a yeah, it's a comfort. So maybe it's something like that. I also love coffee like when I'm working. And so you'll just be like, it just kind of helps me like get in the mode and feel like I'm kind of it's like more of a cozy work sesh instead of like a sit down and do the work, right? I don't know, it just like changes the vibe. Sometimes like lighting a candle, we're like, okay, like add a little mood, add a little vibe. Maybe you need to add a little music, whatever that might be. But take the time to ask yourself, what do you need? And then maybe it's an incentive. Like, can I make this more enjoyable? And also along those lines, one of the things I love, and I forget where I heard this from, so sorry, is what would this look like if it were fun? And I will be the first to tell you, I'm not great at like play and having fun, which is like so embarrassing to admit, but I've already told you that. So, but I believe that it's important. Like, I do believe that play is valuable, and I think that I kind of conflate play and fun. I feel like they're similar enough to where I like use them interchangeably. Um, but there's literal research on how play is important for, I don't remember exactly everything off the top of my head, right? But it's like creativity and creativity mostly, right? Like, so we need play, and I know it's important. And also, if something is fun, we're more likely to do it, right? You're still gonna have maybe the executive function issues where it's like you want to do the thing, but you can't. Okay, and that's understandable. But sometimes if we can make it fun or make it more enjoyable or a little more playful, or even tying back into like do a bad job, right? What if you're just experimenting? What if you're just kind of playing with it, right? You're just like, oh, I'm just like gonna play with this. I'm kind of doing that with social media right now. Like, I'm just gonna play with my TikTok account and like throw some stuff up there and see if anybody likes it. And if not, totally understandable because it's all over the place right now. But I was like, I kept feeling obligated to have like these super curated, like insightful, deep posts every time. And then I just stopped posting for like months because it felt so heavy.
And so I took a step back and I was like, bro, literally, like, it's TikTok. Okay, so what if it was fun? And now it's like voiceovers and like whatever I feel like throwing up there. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll experiment and I'll just play with it and I'll have fun with it. And, we'll do that for a little bit and see if it resonates with anybody, or if it doesn't, right, then maybe I do need to get a little more strategic and take a step back. But in the meantime, it's fun and it's definitely not worse than me just not posting at all. So we're not hurting anybody, right? And then thirdly, so what do you need? Can you incentivize yourself? And what would it look like if it were fun? And how can it be easy? This is my favorite one. This is what I like. This is how I live my life. Because I blow things up in my head so much. And like, I get overwhelmed so easily and things feel so big. And instead of beating myself up and be like, you're dumb, it's not that big of a deal. You should just get over with and like just do the thing and like stop making a mountain out of a molehill. None of that abusive self-talk was helpful. So what I'm trying now, I don't care if what's the Dick, Joe, and Harry could do this like that, and that nobody else thinks this is a big deal. That's not relevant to me because they're not the ones doing it. Okay, so I am responsible for me, and so I'm gonna find a way that works for me to do it. And the way before of just beating myself up and being like, you should just get over it and do it anyway, that's not working for me anymore, and I'm not doing that anymore. Okay, so I'm gonna try something new, and I'm gonna say, hey, maybe this step number one can actually be broken down into step 1A and 1B, or maybe 1A and 1B and 1C and 1D. And not killing anybody to make it easier or to do it smaller. Literally, I have such a hard time letting people into my house to do like home repairs, but there's a couple things that I want to do like soonly, and I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and I finally got to the point where one of my steps was looking up the phone number. And like that was my task for that day. I looked up the phone number, I wrote it down on my next task, which was to make the call. And so it was going to be right there next time, but literally like separating that thing of, oh, call so and so. And if that's easy enough, amazing. Then do that step. But if you find yourself getting overwhelmed by that step of call so and so, how can you break that down more? Maybe you can look up the number first. Or maybe you can, going back to incentivize yourself, right? Maybe you can have your little coffee when you're calling. Or maybe you can tell your sister you're going to call them and you have like that little bit of accountability and support. Or maybe your sister can call them for you and so you can delegate something, right? Like, how can you make it easy? And so maybe if you can break it down or like just do a part of it or delegate some of it, right? And this seems kind of silly, but it's like if you could have somebody else look up the phone number and then you make the call, right? Then that takes one little thing off your plate. So whatever you can do to make it easier is going to help lower that barrier of entry and increase the chances that you're going to be able to do the thing. Okay? Because the whole point of this is when you're at that point where like you need to do the work and you want the result of the work, but you just can't get yourself to do the work, right? So, I hope this helps. As a recap, I want you to encourage you to be gentle with yourself and really consider like what do you need? Because just telling yourself to like get over it, do it anyway, you should be further along, that's not super helpful from personal experience. You don't have to check, I already checked several times. Not super helpful. So checking in with yourself and being like, what do I need? What's actually going to help me? How can I set myself up for success in this situation? Is there some way I can incentivize myself? Is there some way I can make this more fun? Is there some way I can make this easier? And those three questions have helped me through every day. It's just helped me through so much because I do find myself in this situation quite a bit. And so I really hope that they help you as well. If they do, I would love to hear about it. Or if you have any like questions or feedback, definitely let me know. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube because my podcast is on YouTube at The F.I.E.R.C.E Framework, and my email is confidence@thefierceframework.net. So, speaking of my email, if you want to sign up for my little Saturday morning love letters, I would love to have you. I'm going to include a sign up link in the description. And then also, before the podcast drops, like when the podcast drops, I send out a reminder email now. So, especially with it being bi weekly, I know it can be a little hard to keep track of. So, if you want to, well, you can also subscribe, right? Subscribe to the podcast. But if you want to subscribe to the email newsletter, you'll get those reminders as well. Thank you so much for joining me. You are doing so great. I'm so proud of you. I really hope these help because I want you to do the things that you want to do to get you to where you want to go. Okay? I will see you so soon. Until then, keep becoming fierce.